All right, folks, we're back at it with our latest Big Bets update segment. And yes, they did sadly falter in game 2 of a 3-game set against the Baltimore Orioles by a final score 9-5. And this is a continuation of our post-game segment that I've uploaded separately, as I'm sure you guys have a lot more interest in these key Mets updates on the latest in Mets land than you do a 9-5 loss as a shelf life of literally just a couple hours, if any hours, to some of you Mets fans that just want to turn the page, get ready for the next game, rightfully so. So let's break down the latest big updates here, because we have a lot on BenGaml, Dedniel, Nunez, Jose Budo, who I think is very important to note here after Jose Quintana faltered in this rotation yet again, giving up 7 earned runs over 5 innings. That's where Budo comes into play here, and why you might not love what you're going to hear, or you may, it depends on who you're talking to. Kristen Scott, who we have plenty to add on as well, Eddie Rosario, and DJ Stewart. So let's start with the not so big one, but a one that definitely something to make note of for sure, has to do with the following. And shout out to Michael Mayer, who does a great job covering the Mets through Metsmerized blog, stated the following earlier today at the time of recording this, that being August 20th, 2024 here. We see the Mets have announced, the Astros have announced that they have claimed BenGaml off waivers from the Mets. BenGaml, who is placed on waivers inevitably after the return of Starling Marte, which Marte has looked perfectly fine in the Mets lineup since arriving back in said right field position. BenGaml, who's in this logjam as a veteran option for the Mets to consider from AAA, and with multiple guys in Eddie Rosario, DJ Stewart, Jackie Bradley Jr., just to name a few, BenGaml joined the category of Trace Thompson as players that were veteran MLB type options for the Mets to consider, but ultimately didn't need too much at the MLB level. Gamble, they had their flashes of, and honestly, Gamble was fine when he was here. He wasn't utilized all that much, but he did get some hits, he did steal some bags, and he did score some runs. So BenGaml, wishing you the absolute best in your future endeavors, as you will now have a chance to have a run this year with the Houston Astros, who are trying to have another big run in postseason play. So that is the latest there on BenGaml. I know that there is one Twitter follower that I have in particular that is a BenGaml supremacy type. He loves BenGaml and only BenGaml. So to that one typical Mets fan that loves BenGaml more than most, I sincerely apologize that I have to relay the news to you, and I have to be the bearer of bad news, if you will, on the BenGaml front. But that's the latest there on Ben, everybody. Let's get into the big one, which has everything to do with Mr. Dedniel Nunez, and that'll be courtesy of SNY is where we're going to be following all this. I figured let's just do it this way in this format. I think it makes a lot of sense for, honestly, what I want to showcase you guys today. And we have Dedniel Nunez, who looked absolutely fantastic in his latest rehab outing that you guys and gals can see with me right here. Dedniel Nunez did exactly what he needed to do, had himself a scoreless outing, including a strikeout there that we saw for AAA Syracuse. Nunez, who has posted right around a 2.4 ERA and 30 innings for the Mets this season as either one or multi-inning reliever. Nunez with a 12K per 9 to 2 walks per 9, a 10K to walk ratio, one of the best that you will get from any reliever for the Mets this season, have been in dire need of having their flamethrowing right-hander, not named Edwin Diaz, back in this bullpen. Nunez, who had the fastball topping out at 97 in the Syracuse Mets walk-off victory there that we saw this past night. Nunez now looks like he has finished his rehab assignments, and he will be returning to the Mets at some point in the coming days over this next week. We will find out further word from Carlos Mendoza, I'm sure, over the next day, even potentially pregame prior to the game start there against the, that being in the, why am I blanking so bad right now? Who are the Mets play right now? Give me 1 second to figure this out. The Baltimore Orioles, because they never play the O's, so that's why I had a brain fart for a second. But maybe even before that game starts, we may hear some word from Carlos Mendoza. But Dedniel Nunez, who has been leading the way as one of the most reliable, most formidable options in this Mets bullpen, and after seeing a guy in Danny Young being utilized in a 2-run ball game, even lefty-lefty matchups, didn't love that against a really good team, the Orioles, led by Gunnar Henderson, Adley, among others. I just loved seeing Dedniel Nunez set and ready to return this Mets bullpen. And now the big question is, what will be the corresponding move? Because right now, there are 2 guys that stand out quite a bit on that front outside of Adam Ottavino, that being in Mr. Danny Young, that the Mets can consider. Yes, that'll mean that they will not have a southpaw option in their bullpen, should they now call up Alex Young or Matt Gage. Matt Gage has been getting cooked as of late, though, so it would be Alex Young, if anyone, I'm sure. at the minor league level, but then you'd have no lefty options if you parted ways with him and had Nunez back. You could also, and this is honestly might be the route the Mets go, not necessarily that all Mets fans love this, but some do, given his struggles as of late since returning from injury. Reed Garrett still has a minor league option left on his contract. The Mets can pounce and take advantage of that final option should they decide to send him down as a corresponding move. Replace one right-hander that broke out on the scene this year that had flashes of brilliance, but has been far from brilliant as of late, versus a Dedniel Nunez, who more often than not has been that guy for the Mets, has electric stuff, and honestly just has stuff that's going to consistently play a lot more in high-leverage situations than what Reed Garrett and others are going to give you. Reed Garrett is so heavily reliant on making sure that splitty is working to the absolute T, and that sweeper when it's right, and if he has to tap in that four-seam fastball, you know it's going to be batting practice. Dedniel Nunez, you want him to utilize that four-seam fastball as well as he does, because it has great shape, it has great life, and it has high velocity. With the slider, it works brilliantly well too in the high 80s. So that is what we want to see back in this Mets bullpen. Fingers crossed we have an official announcement on Dedniel Nunez in the coming days. But yes, it appears that this may have been his one and only rehab outing, as Carlos Mendoza initially alluded to prior to today's outing for Dedniel Nunez and for the Mets there. So that's the latest on Nunez, the most reliable relief option, not currently in the Mets bullpen. They will get him back as soon as possible. We also have some updates here on Mr. Jose Budo that I would like to share with you all that I believe SNY should have a piece out on from earlier today. We're going to talk about Christian Scott as well that we just skimmed through in a second, everybody. But Jose Budo is a guy that I do want to highlight in this one for each and every one of you, because it's definitely important, in my opinion, on how the Mets evaluate Budo and view his future in the rotation versus the bullpen. And let's see here. I cannot find it popping up at the moment. So let's see if by looking up Jose Budo this way, we're going to be able to find what we're looking for, because there was one key piece I didn't see come out earlier today for each and every one of you to check out. Jose Budo will stay in the bullpen as the Mets feel good about their rotation. Let's check out this latest piece from SNY that came out just under a day ago from Ben Krimmel. Ben Krimmel makes note that, and I quote, and this is from Carlos Mendoza, he's in the bullpen, so we haven't had the discussion at all. Mendoza said before Monday's win over the Baltimore Orioles in their walk-off fashion, he's in the bullpen. He's a huge piece for us. The Mets continue to believe that he's not a guy that they're going to need as a starter. I think pitch count-wise, it's going to be a factor if we ended up needing a starter, Mendoza said, but it's hard for me to answer that question as I sit here. He's in the bullpen. He's a huge piece for us. Everything has pretty much been leading the way for him in the bullpen role, as he's had pretty much a sub-1 ERA for the most part since being turned a reliever versus a starter for Budo this season. And I quote from Carlos Mendoza, he said the following: the good thing is he provides that flexibility. That way he could be a starter, he could be in the bullpen, but right now where we feel where he's best is in the bullpen. I honestly feel that that viewpoint may have changed rather fast, given the continued lack of competency from Jose Quintana, giving up 7 over 5 here, at 8 collective ERA plus over the past 4 starts. For Jose Quintana is not going to get the job done. And as Christian Scott does have a positive update that we're going to get into separately, it doesn't change the fact that Jose Budo, while I believe he is best suited in this Mets bullpen, you do have to wonder if the viewpoint from Carlos Mendoza is going to waver and change at all over this next week, should there continued lack of consistency in the rotation outside of guys like Shamania, Severino, and Peterson prevail. Because as you heard all those names, all those guys have been wild cards at points throughout not only their career, but at points this season. Sevy has been very reliable more often than not. He had a huge start going those full 9 innings, but how is Sevy going to look bouncing back? That's a huge thing, which we simply don't know after throwing those many pitches and eating those many innings for the first time this season. The Mets are going to need as many starting options as possible here. That will not be shocked if they consider the idea of a Jose Budo, but in the interim, at the bare minimum, we have Jose Budo as nothing else but a true bullpen option for Carlos Mendoza and the Mets. And that's just an interesting one to make a note of, knowing that the Mets rotation right now is not overly deep. You have a lot of mid options and you don't have a lot of quality there on that front. And speaking of quality, Christian Scott is a guy that I firmly believe has all the potential to be a quality starter for the Mets, the way that we saw flashes of brilliance of earlier this season. For the rookie right-hander, Christian Scott is looking to return to the Mets as soon as humanly possible after being shut down for 2 weeks with the elbow inflammation that we saw there. And honestly, he's battled back well. After being shut down for 2 weeks, he has no ailment. He has no current issue going on there. While, yes, he does kind of have a partially torn UCL, this is not going to stop not Jose Quintana, but rather Christian Scott from continuing his ramp up. And then eventually down the line, if he needs Tommy John surgery that the Mets can't avoid anymore, they'll deal with it. This is something that they avoided over a year ago, and it looks like that they have avoided again. And now Christian Scott is now at a higher intensity, according to SNY, as he continues to ramp up with a UCL injury. Danny Abriano on the report here and broke down the following that we see as Mets rookie right-hander Christian Scott continues to work toward a potential late-season return from the UCL. He's starting to ramp things up a bit. We saw Mendoza state that Tuesday's game at Citi Field that Scott is throwing with higher intensity on flat ground 105 feet. The next step is for Scott to advance to 115, 120 feet. From there, there's still multiple hurdles in the way, including bullpen sessions, throwing to live hitters, and possibly rehab assignment, but Christian Scott is still trying to work his way back in a return before the end of the season. Scott says, and I quote, "I'm excited." He said, "At the time, I love to do what I do. It's really exciting now that this team is making a push towards the playoffs, so I'm just trying to take things day by day, but hopefully I get to be a part of that." Scott famously had a live reaction that we all saw, being one of the first to greet El Troll Alvarez there on the field yesterday as the Mets won in a walk-off victorious fashion by a final score of 4-3, thanks to Alvarez's first RBI walk-off of his walk-off RBI of his young 22-year-old career. But that's the latest there on Christian Scott, everybody. He's posted a 3.9 ERA this season. Mind you, Scott, who outside of giving up the long ball every single start, has labored big time against lefty hitters this season, has looked brilliant against right-handers. That fastball that tunnels oh so well, which is very deceptive for one that sits in the mid-90s, really can come off looking in the high 90s to those batters, given the great extension that he has. And that slider, when it's right, is brilliant, but it has just been absolutely batting practice for those lefty hitters. Can Scott find balance, maybe with more of a fresh elbow and a fresher arm than what he had earlier this season? We'll find that out as he continues his slow roll of a ramp up this year. But in the interim, Christian Scott continuing to work his way back, a guy that the Mets may consider before the end of the season, but we'll soon find out as he still has to ramp up, face live batters, feel comfortable, there be no setbacks, and then have multiple rehab outings, at least 2 if I had to guess, 2-3 before returning to the Mets, and either as a multi-in reliever or as an actual formidable option in this Metropolitan rotation. So that is the latest there on Christian Scott, everybody. Now let's get into the latest on Mr. Eddie Rosario and DJ Stewart, because we've been talking so much about Brett Baty lately, right? We've been talking about how Brett Baty has really been looking like a guy that's doing everything in his power to make sure that he gets the call that he is considered by the Mets when they expand rosters sooner rather than later. The one problem, there are a couple other MLB caliber bat options for the Mets to consider at the minor league level, and it's not just guys in Jackie Bradley Jr., it's also guys that the Mets have recently just signed in former Atlanta Brave 2021 playoff MVP Eddie Rosario. As you guys can all see here with me, Eddie Rosario here rips one, and he has himself a blast. This would be a game-tying home run by Eddie that we see in the matchup. Great call, too, by the AAA play-by-play there for Syracuse Mets. Eddie Rosario, who has struggled to see the ball well at all at the major league level this season, still with 10 home runs, 30-plus RBIs on the year, and a couple stolen bags. Rosario is trying to get back to the bigs as a 4th, 5th outfield option off the bench. The Mets already have 5 outfield options right now: Jesse Winker, Starling Marte, Brandon Nimmo, Harrison Bader, and Tyrone Taylor. Not all of them play great defense, nor does Eddie, but Eddie does still bring an MLB caliber bat like a BenGaml. Basically, that would be essentially a BenGaml replacement for the Mets to consider as the rosters expand later on this season for not only offense, but for pitching as well. My question to each and every one of you is, after seeing Eddie now finally start getting the swing of things with AAA Syracuse after signing with them, is he a bat that you would like the Mets to consider more than a Brett Baty, a DJ Stewart, or a Jackie Bradley Jr. when evaluating who should go in that final offensive spot when rosters expand? Or you want to go with the guy that was the home run hero, not the guy tying the ball game, but the guy walking off with a bomb, that being DJ Teddy Bear Stewart, with the home run to right, walks it off for the Syracuse Mets in their 3-4 victory over Durham in this matchup that we see here. DJ honestly had some flashes of brilliance with the Mets this season that we all saw, but really struggled to take the bat off his shoulders. Is not a great defensive option. Is more of a true standalone DH option, a lefty bat that you platoon, that you don't even want to face lefty all that much. DJ really just needs to get a meatball to rip it, and that's where you're going to get at best with DJ. He has a far better eye at the plate than Eddie Rosario, no denying that. Can get on base at a much solid clip. but what he provides you with his base running ability, more of lack thereof, is why I'm not in love with the idea of DJ being the guy the Mets consider. Yes, he has had a flair for the dramatic and had some nice home run hits for the Mets this season, but they are so few and far in between that I still think that you can make a rightful argument to a degree of a Brett Baty, of a Eddie Rosario, and I'd say to a lesser degree a little bit, even though he provides more defensive versatility, a Jackie Bradley Jr. as well. So those are the latest updates on that front, folks. Again, I want to know between the following players and DJ Stewart, Eddie Rosario, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Brett Baty, which bat out of the four do you think makes the most sense for the Mets to call up when rosters expand and why? Let me know it here in the show. Thank you all so much for that, as always, everybody. And now, before we wrap things up, let's get into the latest on the prospect end, because as we typically do for our post-game segments, we're just going to do right now in general to check on the key updates there from the Syracuse Mets this past night. Same thing with the Brooklyn Cyclones, the Port St. Lucie Mets, but we cannot forget there the Rumble Ponies in between, which my good friend Isaac Rothman, our pitching contributor on the channel, was in attendance to see Nolan McLean have a fantastic outing, his best start of the year at the AA level. We're going to expand more on that here in just a minute, everybody. But the Rumble Ponies not the Rumble Ponies. We saw there the Syracuse Mets win this one by a final score of 3-2, thanks to a walk-off bomb from DJ Stewart after a game-tying bomb by Mr. Eddie Rosario. Jake Mangum, funny enough, was batting leadoff against the Mets in this one. Mangum, who's an outfield prospect that a couple years ago we were upset was available for the Marlins to pick up. He has not amounted to anything at the MLB level, just a high-contact hitting, solid, versatile outfielder that just hasn't been given many opportunities at the major league level. Luis Angel Acuna and Mr. Drew Gilbert had nothing to provide on the offensive end. Yeah, the biggest showings were the ones I mentioned. Dominic Hamill with a solid outing. We'll take that, Dom. Gladly, Dominic Hamill with 5 innings of 7 hit, 2 earned run ball, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, a 6.5 ERA, but a much better start, a nice rebound start for Dom, who got absolutely cooked his last time out there. Dedniel Nunez with 1 scoreless inning, as we mentioned in the show already. Eric Orzi with 1.2 shutty, which looks strong, including 3 strikeouts. And Alex Young, who pitched 1.1 scoreless innings, including just a walk. Alex Young, absolutely an arm that the Mets may consider should they part ways with Danny Young, should Danny continue to struggle the way that he faltered there in the Mets' 9-5 loss to the Baltimore Orioles. Now let's get into the Rumble Ponies and let's see what transpired with Nolan McLean, Ryan Clifford, who was absolutely torching baseballs in this one. As the Rumble Ponies in their matchup, did they win? Did they lose? Let's find out together, everybody. They did, in fact, win by a final score of 4-2 over the Reading Fighting Phils. The Fighting Phils, who are pretty much, not even an hour away from where I reside in Pennsylvania. I don't hit that park all that often. I hit it years ago, though, when it was the Fighting Phils versus the Binghamton, not Rumble Ponies, but the Mets. Back when Amado Rosario was the Mets' top prospect in AA, didn't even play. I was so sad. I went out of my way to go see him. But Dom Smith, I think, went 2 for 4 with an RBI double. Dom, who was heavier set at the time, still struggling with his sleep in the minor leagues and everything in between. Crazy to see how long ago that already was. We see, though, for the Rumble Ponies, they get Wyatt Young, who continues to absolutely look fantastic as a leadoff, high-contact hitter out of a shortstop for the Mets. Wyatt Young, who was the Mets minor league player of the week this past week offensively, outside of Brett Baty, continues to look great with a 4 for 4 game, including 2 runs scored, a 283 average of 749 OPS on the season. Rudick continues to look well there, a solid at least 2 for 3 day. Ryan Clifford, who's one of my favorite Mets pitchers, not pitchers, but prospects in general, 1 for 3 with an RBI and a run scored, 224 average, but an 808 OPS on the season. Alex Ramirez, 1 for 4 with a couple RBIs, but he's been underwhelming. Since they moved Alex Ramirez out of the leadoff spot, Wyatt Young has absolutely thrived there, the shortstop, and that'll continue. On the pitching end, Nolan McLean with 6 innings of 4 hit, 1 earned run ball, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts for McLean. Awesome outing for him. We saw Trey McLaughlin with another brilliant outing in relief. 1 scoreless inning there. Love to see that as well with a 2 ERA. McLaughlin, loving that from the 2 mix there between the 2 back-to-back. And then as we then pivot, folks, to the Cyclones, let's see what my high contact hitting, solid range on the defensive end for the outfield. And Nick Morabito, who was a top draft pick by the Mets over the past year or so. Let's see what he has for the Mets in this matchup. Did they win? Did they lose? They lost 10-9 to the Jersey Shore. To the Jersey Shore. What was it? The Blue Claws, whoever they are. Sadly, the Cyclones lost in this one. Yep. 10-9 is your final. Nick Morabito with a nice day, though. 2 for 4 with a couple walks and a run scored. A 284 average on the season now for Morabito. Then we saw Smith in right field, 2 for 6 with 4 RBIs. A 259 average of 656 OPS. We see Lugo, 2 for 4 with a couple RBIs. Again, not guys that we need to make too much note of at the moment, prospect-wise. Wenninger, who looked brilliant his past start, looked horrendous this time. Gave up 6 runs, only 2 earned, though, so I shouldn't say horrendous. Bad defensive hiccups. Honestly, some bad funnies there by the Mets minor league has probably led to that. 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, 2.9 ERA. I misspoke there. I did not realize that it was only runs that were 6, and there were only 2 earned runs on him. So bad funnies hurt the Cyclones in that one, which led to that 10-9 loss, but a nice rally for the offense, no less, as they had plenty to show. And the Port St. Lucie Mets, who I'm sure lost the same way that they've lost most games this season, as one of the worst teams in all of Low A this season. Let's see how they fared in their final matchup that we saw over this past night, and they did falter as expected to Palm Beach Cardinals by a final score of 5-3. Let's see what Colin Houck, Mets top draft pick from a year ago, who has been very underwhelming his first year in the pros, has done in this matchup. Houck goes over 3, 206 average, 614 OPS. Nothing else really making note of there on the offensive end whatsoever. Pitching-wise, it was a bullpen game, and Kyle Crick, who's been out all year with injury, began his rehab assignment, gave up 1 earned run, only had 1 out and a pair of walks. Crick, not a guy I expect the Mets to utilize in their bullpen right now, but could be a guy that they utilize before the end of the season should things really change big time, and should Crick get in the flow of things with this slider before the end of the season. But that's the latest on the Big Up Mets updates, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching live, my live viewers on YouTube. If you watch this on replay as an individual segment after the fact, let me know your biggest takeaway from BenGaml, Nunez, Budo, Scott, Rosario, DJ, and others. Drop them down below. Which bat out of the 4 that we discussed as well do you think makes the most sense, and why to be called upon for the Mets when they expand their rosters? Drop them down below. Thank you all so much for the endless support, everybody. I greatly appreciate that. And did Baez have a good day? I apologize if I was wrong there. Jesus Baez, Jesus Baez wasn't even in the lineup there that we saw for the Rumble Ponies. Pardon me, not Rumble Ponies, for Port St. Lucie. Because Baez, he isn't up with the Cyclones already, I don't believe, is he? If I missed Baez, I apologize. Jesus Baez has been absolutely tearing the cover off the ball, though. He is one of the hardest hitters that the Mets have in all the minor leagues outside of Ryan Clifford. He tears the cover off the ball. Love some Jesus Baez the same way that I love getting out of here because your boy had a late night. Let's see if the Mets can rebound in their series finale against the O's. Maybe they already lost or won by the time you watch this. Either way, this is your guy Wardy signing out. Thank you so much for the endless support. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.